Let's talk about the key parts of Tunisian crochet. When beginning on a Tunisian crochet project, regardless of what stitch or pattern or garment is, they will all have a similar format that contain these items: a foundation row, forward pass, return pass, fabric body, edge stitches, a bind off, a right side and a wrong side. In order for us to accomplish our goal here, we are going to go through what each one of these are. So every Tunisian pattern has a foundation row. The foundation row is the very beginning of any pattern of any fabric that you are about to make. And this is similar to what it will look like. It has these open parts in between it, as you can see here. And it has each of the stitches that will make up what part of the fabric you will be working on. The foundation row will be the exact same layout regardless of whatever pattern you will be doing. The difference between the foundation rows will come in the technique of making it. The time that there will be a difference with how a foundation row is worked is if the designer specifically calls for something different for the foundation row. In that case, the designer will be very specific on how you are to complete your foundation row. There are two different types of ways that you can go about making your foundation row. One is called the crocheter's preference, and that one is the most commonly technique used in making a Tunisian crochet foundation row. The second one is one that I worked with one of my testers with. She was a student in one of my classes and doesn't like to chain things, and she thought it would be a lot easier if we could come up with a knitter's preference. And so we began a system of helping knitters be able to transfer over to Tunisian crochet with a little bit more ease, and came up with a foundation row called a knitter's preference. Now, the foundation row has a forward pass and a return pass, and it is integral to completing any Tunisian crochet piece. It's also one of the most frustrating parts for a lot of people, so make sure that you are careful or you are patient with yourself as you are learning this new skill. Okay? Unlike both knit and crochet, Tunisian crochet is worked in two separate parts. The first part is called the forward pass, and the second part is called a return pass. Both passes can be varied to create different stitches and looks. When working the forward pass, the row below is closing off each of the stitches, while the new loops on the hook are starting a new row. When a return pass is being worked, it's filling in between the stitches being made on the bottom row, and you end up getting a very beautiful fabric that is made. Now, when making any piece with yarn, whether it's a scarf or dishcloth or a sweater, the main part is called the fabric body. With the many different kinds of knitting and crocheting, makers form their fabric by hand with the measurements of the final product taken into account. Most people like to do whatever the patterns specify, and it's a lot easier just to go ahead and get a pattern. A lot of times, you can find a lot of really good free patterns if you don't want to buy patterns. However, the ones that usually cost money are the ones that have undergone a lot editing services that are paid for. It also has testers that do it and make sure that the written pattern is clear, concise, and makes the final product according to what the picture looks like. This stands true for Tunisian crochet as well. The technical difference, however, is that the fabric body is considered active between the two edge stitches. With knit and standard crochet, the edge stitches are considered part of the active body, but in Tunisian crochet, that is not the case. So while the starting and ending stitch on both knit and standard crochet will change depending on what is being worked in the body, Tunisian crochet starting and ending stitch won't change with different stitches or patterns, even though the starting edge stitch is worked differently than the ending edge stitch. The technique of the separate stitches remain the same in every piece of fabric. So as you can see here in this one, this stitch right here at the very beginning is called the front edge stitch or beginning edge stitch, and this one at the very back, you can kind of see it loops right here, that is called the ending edge stitch or the return edge stitch. It really depends. The point being that these two stitches are not an active part of the pattern. So regardless of whatever you do in between this body or with these stitches in between the two stitches, you will not need to change the technique on how you make these stitches. Think of Tunisian crochet as a framed picture. The beginning stitch and the ending stitch of every row are not considered an active part of the pattern, but are to serve as an outline or as a frame. In a way, those two stitches are preset for the majority of the patterns and will always be the same in relation to how they are being made. The only time it will not be the same is if there's an increase or decrease, or if the designer tells you explicitly what needs to be done. Now, here you can see how this ending part is worked up right here, and you have these nice straight edges that are done. Now this stitch right here that's on your hook, the very last one that you get, is also considered a beginning edge stitch or the front edge stitch. So that one that's on your hook is coming up off of this one, so you will never have to do anything special with this stitch right here because it's already on your hook and worked once you are done with your return pass. Now there's a right side and a wrong side. Here you can see what the right side is. It has this very beautiful, there's very direct, straightforward lines that you can see. The back part is more of a woven look, and this back part is called the wrong side. So whenever you're working it, you can see this is the right side and this is the wrong side. When you work up a Tunisian crochet piece, it will always be done on the right side. You will never have to turn your piece around. For both standard crochet and knitting, you do end up turning your pieces back and forth, but with Tunisian crochet, you just work it from the bottom to the top. Working at Tunisian fabric is like working at a typewriter, but backwards. The beginning starts on the right bottom side, which is right down here, and at the end of the row we enter. So at the end of the row we enter or return to do the next row. So when we work all the way down this way, we do a chain, and that will bring our row up so that we can start preparing for the next row being made. You will see that as we continue working our example pieces. Unlike knit and standard crochet, the Tunisian fabric, once again, will not be turned around at any time during the workup unless the designer explicitly states, which is quite rare at this stage in Tunisian crochet. The right side is the side facing towards the maker during the creation, and the wrong side faces away. The front is also lined and defined typically, whereas the wrong side oftentimes looks woven, similar to a knitted stockinette fabric. Now, when it says bind off and weave in ends, the bind off part is the part of the fabric that ends the making of it, so closes out each of the stitches. Now, we will go into further depth a little bit later in this course to describe how you close off each of your stitches and a couple different techniques that can be done to close them off. A stitch won't be dropped if you don't close it off, unlike knitting, but you can make it look a lot prettier instead of leaving it open like this for your piece of fabric to be completed.